Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Future of XYZ. With us is Logitech's head of design, focused on MX product series and UX design for the personal workspace solutions group, Xinyue Zhou. Xinyue, thank you so much for joining us on Future of XYZ today.
Thank you for having me.
Your title is a mouthful, to put it mildly, but our topic today is very simple. It's called The Future of the Mouse. We've never done an episode in 140 episodes quite like this one. And the mouse in this case is obviously what you work on a lot at Logitech, one of the world's most recognized companies for what we call pointing devices. So the mouse attached to a computer or not attached to a computer. Let's start just straight off for the topic definition. What, in the context of your expertise and experience, how do we define the mouse?
Yes, of course. So I imagine maybe yourself or the listeners are maybe even holding a mouse at the moment or possibly has been using a mouse today or in your daily life. So a computer mouse, as you said, is a pointing device. It's one of the most primary input device that we use to interact with the computers. It translates your hand movements most likely in a 2D surface, left and right, back and forward, into controlling the motion of the pointer, the cursor, right, and in the graphical user interface in our computer. So it typically has the sensor that track the movement, the left and right button to select, to click, and have the scroll wheel to navigate the content, most likely vertically. But now the modern mouse has evolved to have more and more features. It has more buttons. Typically, the side buttons are more programmable buttons that you can customize in different shortcuts. Even having gestures, more scrolling wheels, and then of course the gaming mouse has lots of different lightings and then to customize to be immersed into the game. So it's becoming a very interesting object, like everyone touch, and it is to do all your daily activities with your computer.
I have a very, very simple Logitech mouse here.
Oh, nice.
It couldn't be simpler. It works with my remote, my wireless keyboard. And so I tried to get an ergonomic one not so long ago, as recommended to me by a doctor, but I'm sticking with what I have.
Yeah, speaking of, I highly recommend the vertical mouse because I personally had the issue with the pain on my wrist. And before the pain, I was really not into it. And once I have the issue, totally recommend to try.
I've heard that before. I actually ordered one and then realized that it wasn't going to work with the keyboard, and so I needed to upgrade everything. And I hate waste, so when this fails, I will go there. Xinyue, I'm curious. I mean, you have a very broad background, a research, design, strategy, rooted in this interaction design. You grew up in China. You live in Lausanne, Switzerland, where Logitech is headquartered. You've spent a lot of time. You got your master's in Chicago at the Chicago Institute of Design. You were in San Francisco at Logitech's office. And of course, you were an IF Design Award juror this year as well. So you spent a lot of time in the international sphere as well as I would say cross-functionally within this space. I mean, I'm very curious from a experiential perspective for you. Are there differences in the course of your career that you've seen in these various kind of functions of how they approach the mouse and or geographically, or is it kind of a universe? Is this one of the few things the mouse is universal?
Yes, indeed, I have quite a diverse background from industrial design to UX and then software and now back with hardware. Although I feel the mouse is probably has been quite universal, like it's been quite simple for most people that using a basic mouse like you like having just the two buttons, the wheel. But working with of diverse international designers and groups. And then as we designing more and more mice that really putting the user into the center, we really see that everyone needs have different, very different needs on the mouse, right? Like I have small hands. Some people have bigger hands. People have different ways holding the mouse. Uh, I'm probably less strength, so I cannot. Uh, I cannot stand clicks with high forces. I have very short fingers. I cannot reach the button.
Or someone with a disability, I guess also you have to think about accessibility issues too.
Yes, yes, of course. On and left-handed versus right-handed, vertical with flat, different. I'm personally, I call myself a palm feeler, but it's a palm feeling grip. But there are other people grip holding the mouse in very different ways. Like we're always surprised how come someone, when you do user tests, how come someone is using a mouse that way, and oh, we need to really design specifically to avoid misclicks. So it is a very universal, familiar shape for people around the world, like using computer every day. However, everyone have very different needs of a mouse. It's very exciting to design an object that works for millions of people, but all using differently.
Well, I was going to say it's really exciting because the products you're designing are used by millions of people. I mean, Logitech is, I couldn't get exact numbers, but I mean, ostensibly, Logitech is the world's largest mouse provider, or at least one of them and one of the most reputable. And my understanding is that the business unit that you oversee UX for, which includes all these pointing devices, including the mouse, does about 16 to 20% of Logitech's $4.5 billion revenue. So it's not only touching tens of millions of people, but it's also a huge revenue impact. If we think about it, I mean, I'm curious to go back in history a little bit. Like, how did the mouse evolve? And I guess also, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but like, what's a mouse's purpose in life?
Yeah, so let's start where it started, right? So it is not it doesn't have very long history, of course. So it started in 1960s where people started prototyping the first mouse. And I highly recommend to watch the demo, the mother of our demos, that when the mouse was firstly introduced and showed how to use point and click and drag. And at the very beginning, it was just a wooden box with one button and then two wheels and this track. And it really evolves only until maybe the 80s when the first commercial mouse came, and that was still having just a trackball, in the back, and then with only one or two buttons. So that's, let's say, from the first commercial mouse to now, it's been only 40 years, and it has been evolving really fast. I think only until maybe the 90s that start having the wheel, and now there are more and more buttons. But the evolution of a mouse really, the innovation of the mouse really revolutionized like how we interact with the computers, the graphical interface that introduce clicks and drags and hover state, drag and drop, and influence all the future human machine, human computer interactions. And your second question was around how. Wait,
what is the purpose of a mouse?
Yeah, so I guess probably for you, we use it every day, right? So you click, you drag, select, but the purpose is really the first up, like we in Logitech we call it the first millimeter you hold and you touch that you interact with the digital world, and it really helps. I mean, complete all your daily tasks, no matter it's just filling the tax forms, browsing the internet, or very complex activities, Excel or 3D or graphical design.
Graphic design, yeah.
There are gonna be lots of movements, fine tuning, rotating, pan, zoom, right? And then also for the gamers, like they it's essential for them to be able to move fast and then win the game. It's probably, as I said, like it's the mostly probably the besides the keyboard, the most important input device that we use to interact with the digital world.
It's so interesting, and I love that the title is the mouse, and it's a funny terminology for something that is, as you say, such a critical component of interacting with our digital devices. What is that research process, or what? How do you kind of go about designing a mouse, as you said before, for all of these different use cases, all of these different audiences? What does that look like?
So it's a typical user-centered design process, right? As everyone else designing products. So you start, of course, with who is the target user, who you're designing for. So at Logitech, we have different target groups. Like for the group that I'm working most with at the moment, like we focus on creative designers and developers, analytics. So we call them advanced users because they have very advanced, complex tasks on the interface that they need to navigate. They need really advanced features of the mouse to be able to be very precise, to be able to navigate and move quickly and the content. But then you also have, like we mentioned, about ergonomic needs, like when you design for someone who is pain, with the needs that still need to use the computer with the mouse 8 hours a day, they have different needs. And then we have other categories of target users, of course, that the gamers or lifestyle, that people looking for something, not a black plastic mouse, something more having more emotional attachments with them. So yeah, and you start from there, and then you design the feature. So coming from a user experience background on the software side, designing hardware requires lots of more different expertise of designs. So you have the industrial designs, designing the shape, that the size that need to be fitting with the different target users. As a UX designer, we need to define how many buttons, which button do what, which button should be placed where. How each button act when you press or hold or double press, and how the different operating systems react to your actions. And then, of course, the color, material, and finishings, and then all the others.
But it's highly complex, actually, in a very interesting way, it seems to me, because I think about that kind of the research piece, right? And all the different need states. Okay. And I want to talk about commercialization, go to market, marketing, and things like that. But you're talking about having studied and been a software UX, user experience designer previously, and now really like also focused on the hardware side. You're doing both software and hardware, which of course has there's an intersection, which is where the greatness happens. But I'm really curious, and as you know, as a juror at IF, the design award has both UI and UX disciplines because both have been growing rapidly. I'm curious why you call what you're doing UX and not UI, specifically when we're talking about the digital interface of this hardware solution, right? So could you talk about the differences a little bit between UI and UX?
Yeah, of course. So the UI designers or UX UI designers typically reference the designer who design a digital interface, a web page, software in the computer, and mostly today like an app in your phone, and then how you interact with your fingers or with the mouse and that's I believe that's the typical category when most people refer to themselves as UX designer, UI designer, or UX UI, or nowadays product designers is a common name. That's typically representing a completely digital products, like digital only products. Whereas which me and my team, and we started growing this capability at Logitech as well, that we call ours, we most of us coming from a UX design, UX UI design background, but now not seeing the opportunity to design the experience for a hardware. And then typically a mouse or a keyboard doesn't have a screen there. So there is no graphical interface that we're designing for the product itself. Although still there are lots of experience to be designed. It's not just the shape or the form. Like I already said before, that there are the buttons, there's how you connect with the computer, how you interact with the computer, how each button should be placed, and how you also, there is a companion software that goes with typically today with most modern mice that enhance the experience. And of course that's where the comfort zone the UX designer feel like when adding more capabilities through the software to improve the experience of the hardware. But we still kind of call ourselves UX designers.
It's funny because I think about, I mean, kind of this human machine interplay. You know, we have the trend report that just came out, the 4th annual IF Design Trend Report, and human machine team play is actually like a big macro trend that we're continuing to observe. So what you're describing as far as UX is exactly that's actually where this intersectionality happens. You and I, when we met at Adobe Max in October last year, and your whole Logitech team was there, and it was so fascinating, and that's how this conversation sparked. We talked a little about something that I hadn't even thought about, which is kind of the human feedback piece of this, which is that sensorial, tactile need, like that click, that roll. Like, can you talk a little bit as a UX designer for software who moved into hardware, kind of what that looks like and how you've come to think about it at Logitech for the mouse?
Yes, it's not that easy because when all the engineers think, oh, we have a UX designer, he or she can help us define what's a better clicking, what's a better tracking, what's a better scrolling, how the force of the buttons. Everyone suddenly come question you when you don't really know how you define what's a better UX. All I can do is say is by understanding who are our target user, what they might think is a better click or a better scroll. So starting with the click, so we recently applied almost the silent click to almost all our product line, knowing when all of us have been transitioning work from home for the past 5 years. No one wants to noisy clicks when your partner is maybe working in the same room. But also the scrolling, like how instead of a basic mechanical line by line, how you can scrolling fast, really truly to understand what the user's goal and want to achieve in the interface, in the UI that has maybe a long page to go through, or really need to pan and zoom into a 2D Photoshop interface, understanding what they do and how you apply the functionality of each buttons.
It's totally incredible, actually. I mean, the things that we take for granted in our everyday lives. I think that's, one of the things that Future of XYZ we're always trying to do is, just because I'm curious, but I have to say, Xinyue, as soon as we had this conversation, I was like, oh, we have to talk about this, because I never, ever stopped to think about it, except as I mentioned, the ergonomic thing. So
But it's the magic of muscle memories, right? Like it's when you design something that people can easily get used to it, and then you forget about it. Like we talked a lot about how to turn something magical that you don't even need to think, and it just worked the way you expect.
Totally. Totally. And that's great design. Ultimately, that is actually what makes really excellent design is when we don't have to think about it because it's seamless. Probably why Logitech ended up in the position it is on this topic. This is the future of the mouse. So I want to kind of pivot into a little bit more of that conversation. I mean, in some part, I have to say, as you know, I'm like really kind of nerdy excited about like what happens when like your eyes look at something and then you just blink twice, like when we think about like the Apple device that they introduced last year, any number of things, or like you think about even an implant like a neural link. I mean, this might be a ways out, but how are you all, and how are you specifically as a UX designer thinking about the future of the mouse? I mean, is the mouse not at some point going to die?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the worry of the death of mouse, especially at Logitech, we think of every time when a new technology comes up. When started with like when the introduction of iPad and touch screens, everyone's gonna go mobile. No one gonna use laptops. Why they're still gonna use a mouse? And then, of course, the VR and AR revolution. And recently, the AI that, oh, everything can be done with just one click. Before a graphic designer, if you want to remove the background, you maybe need to select a tool, select where you want to crop, you use another tool, remove the background. Or if you want to color background in a different way, using a color tool, pick the color, many steps. And the examples goes in many spaces. I'm sure everyone now, our listeners probably has been really leveraging AI in our daily workflows. So before things can be done through hours with mutable hundreds, thousands mouse clicks can be done with just one click. It could be even done maybe just through voice, like say something directly or even a touch. So of course that's the role of the mouse is evolving, and then there are more ways to interact with the graphical interface or even the more dimensional interfaces. And there's touch, there's voice, there is eye tracking. There are more and more of input that can be data of input can be sensed by the operating system. It is I think we're maybe in a pivotal time that the role of a mouse may be evolving, although the interface hasn't really changed much, right? Like the advanced user or everyday life, the interface is still it's still the 2D graphical GUI, graphical user interface. The position of so maybe an example is like before Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop interface, the user need to really, a designer really need to learn how to use it. And there are tools on all on the top, on the left, on the right. You even need to maybe go to the menu on the top, go to the sub layer, to really just to click something. A developer really need to learn all the shortcuts and all the tools. I think there has been lots of articles talking about that we have been having what they call the precision interface, or an interface that the user need to learn how to control. Where we are evolving to intent based interface where the interface knows more about the context where we are in.
Wow.
where you are trying to do. The Photoshop interface has been evolving in the past years with AI. And then there's a floating menu with actions, and you can directly click instead of finding somewhere hidden in the menu. I noticed Google Slide recently introducing a set panel on the right with some AI functions, or so all the functions is moving closer to where your cursor is, your mouse, to reducing the movement of your cursor.
Hmm.
Or easier. It's gonna be evolve easier as how user can interact
We're
with.
saying that it's going to, from a UX perspective or a UI perspective, it's going to be easier and easier for the user because it's going to become more intuitive. Of course, I'll just drop it, but like the environmental impact of all of that AI generated
Oh, yeah.
system is, of course, like really bad for the planet, and not necessarily. I'm not so sure it's so good for our creative brains either. But that's. I'll hold on to my mouse for a
Yeah.
while. Xinyue, the time has flown, which is a bummer because I love this topic. I want to come to our last two questions. The first of those last two questions is for anyone who's listening or watching today who wants to learn more about the history, the present, or the future of the mouse, where would you recommend that they go?
Um, as you said, like Logitech has the biggest market share in this space. So of course, coming to Logitech.com that has all the different variety type of mouse that to get familiar with uh, the type of products like you can interact and the type of features.
So all the
Um,
customizations, all the sensors, all of the colors and
You want to
buttons
be
and
a nerd of a mouse, which is such an odd maybe product to be a nerd about. So yeah, but there's so much content online about the histories. But maybe I want to touch about like how to be a UX designer in a hardware. So we touched a bit already, and I didn't mention. So internally to really differentiate the UX designer that designing for hardware versus the software. Sometimes we call it a hardware UX designer or a business group UX designer because you are designing product for a group. I saw it online that some companies also start introducing the hardware UX designer. It is a very exciting, I think, growing job type for designers to explore as there are more and more smarter devices that has Internet of Things or that has the capability to think and then to interact is exciting to for me. That's I think is a perfect job for me to having the ability to design the interface, but also products people can hold that really uh, kind of everything you want to do with your product, you see how it react with all the computers, with everyone playing with it.
it's so interesting. So hardware UX is the new design role that Xinyue Zhou of Logitech is predicting is like the future. I love that. Um, and the last question, as we asked, is the mouse dead? And we talked about the future, and we talked about its reasonably recent past, which of course corresponds to the growth of computers and digital in general. But if we're thinking today, it's May 2025, and we're looking out to 25 years from now, so 2050. What is your greatest hope for the future of the mouse in say 2050, 50?
Oh, as so far away as the technology has evolved so fast recently. But I believe that the human behaviors doesn't really change much. The need for something comfortable, easy, intuitive will never change. Um, as a female designer in a very hardware heavy industry. I think we at Logitech we have been really trying to design a mouse for everyone that is not one fit all, is to have the different options. So I really hope that we have products that fit everyone's different needs. As a people with small hands, I have a mouse for me. As people with accessibility needs, or even we recently talk a lot about even temporary accessible needs. If I'm a mom holding a baby, I won't be able to have the two hands working. So that's one part I really hope the digital the computer electronics and can be really accessible for everyone and be sustainable. I know you also want to touch that topic as well. So I think really how we used to say desirability, viability, and feasibility, and how inclusivity and sustainability can be really a core pillar to be evaluated against the other altogether, and really can make a decision, say, if this has a huge impact on the carbon, that we can balance the viability versus the sustainability, and how that really change all the design process, and how sustainability really integrated into the new design process.
I love that, as you know, for lots of different reasons. And I know Logitech's made some pretty huge net zero and carbon commitments over the next while. It is interesting to imagine that when you start the design process of something that seems so little as a mouse, but tens of millions of units are being sold of it every year, that electronic waste, that plastic waste, that production waste is really significant. So that you have to start at the beginning to design design environmental sustainability as well as that accessibility and inclusivity on the social side in.
Yes, it's totally. It's hard to imagine how much plastic and PCBs we're producing every year, and hopefully, it's not just reducing the CO2, but also how to create more emotional durability that people can, and we try to create a mouse that can last really long, but we also want user to have a longer emotional attachment to it, so that you don't get bored with it after 2-3 years, and you are able to enjoy it for a longer time.
I love that as a vision for the future. I think that could apply to every single product category in the whole world. But I appreciate it coming from you regarding the future of the mouse. Xinyue Zhou, thank you so much for joining us on Future of XYZ today. It was totally awesome.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
Everyone watching and listening, thanks for joining us. Please be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform so that others can find us. Follow on Instagram, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks.